All right, welcome back after Christmas break. And now we're going to take a look at the war in the Pacific in World War II. And because of a time restraint, we're going to be severely condensed here. So I do not want you to walk away thinking that the war in the Pacific is as simplistic as I've made it out to be. It's as simplistic because I am limited by time. And so let's take a look at this and get into it. We didn't fight a war in Europe and then turn around and fight in the Pacific. Both of them are going on at the same time. But I wanted to focus first on Europe and then on the Pacific. So that's what we're attempting to do here. And let's try if we can get down to the other slide. So there we go. Sorry about that, guys. First and foremost, war will start, and it'll start almost simultaneously. So we'll have us declaring war on Japan on December 8th, 1941, and then 2 days later, Germany will declare war on us. But how did we get to that point? So number one, tensions are going to rise in the Pacific. Japan had looked at the United States and saw a country that literally 100 years before, in 1840, had a economy and an impact on the world that was extremely small. And they saw that now, here we are 100 years later, and we're a world power. And Japan looked at us as a model of how to become a world power. And for the most part, Japan had always been an isolationist country. And now they were looking to become a major player on the field. So they decided they were going to build their empire much like we did through imperialism. Now remember, imperialism is the idea that you have a cookie and I want it. And I may negotiate with you to get it, or if I'm just stronger than you, I'll just take it from you, and then I'll rationalize it another way. So Japan's looking at most of Eastern Asia, and it said, I want this. And in 1905, Japan and Russia had gone to war, and though Russia was considerably larger, Japan took them behind the woodshed and really whooped up on them. And they were looking and saying, you know what, we're going to go back and we're going to take some more area from the Soviet Union. So they're looking at the Southern Hemisphere and saying, we want to have some of these things that the United States has, and the only way we're going to get that is by taking it from them. And they are a nation that does not have any energy, so they have no oil or steel. So they look to get these through imperialism. In 1937, Japan will declare war on China, and from that, they're going to cause a great deal of carnage. And no, we're not going to do anything. The United States and the world is going to do nothing. We've talked about this, where they're going to just leave the League of Nations, and nothing's going to happen. Then in 1940, as we've mentioned before, Japan will sign the Tri-Pact with Germany and Italy, and nothing's done there. And so we have a variety of spots of tensions that come about, and we've talked about this in the earlier lectures, whether it be the size of the Navy or land masses that they were taking, or the United States reaction to that with embargoes. That's going to cause tension to rise very high between the United States and Japan. So we're almost without any doubt, the United States had gone in and we had broken the Japanese code, and we were hearing messages back and forth between the Japanese and their embassy in our country, and coded transmissions going between one location to another. And we were pretty much aware of something going negatively as far out as 6 months. But by 3 months, we were well aware that the Japanese were planning on attacking us somewhere. We just didn't know exactly where or precisely how it was going to happen. but we knew it was coming. Again, we're going to know 2 days. December 7th comes on a Sunday. Well, on Friday, all diplomatic relationships between Japan and the United States broke off. They took their entire embassy group and ambassador back home. And we still will end up having our Seventh Fleet, the Pacific Fleet, all in harbor in Japan, in Pearl Harbor, and sitting in harbor, not on full alert and being surprise attack. So let's back up a little bit. In January of 1941, an admiral by the name of Yamamoto had developed a plan for the Japanese to attack the United States at Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was the place, if you remember, that the United States took from the Hawaiians because it has a deep water port. One of the reasons was because it had a deep water port, and we wanted to protect our mainland from attack. And so Yamamoto had looked at this and said, we need to attack the United States at their base in Pearl Harbor. And Japan, why would Japan come and do this? I mean, it's a sucker punch. But Japan believed it could win a decisive victory against a much larger country in America if it hit a decisive victory. And so if they can destroy our fleet in the Pacific before we're ever aware of it, then they can win this thing. And so that's what Yamamoto's plan came to. He's going to have a surprise attack against us. So as I mentioned, tensions have risen. We know we're going to be attacked. We move the Seventh Fleet into the Pacific about 2 years before this. This will irritate the Japanese. We'll put an embargo on oil and steel. That's going to really infuriate the Japanese because now they're cut off from that. And when they come and attack us, it's one of those unforeseen or unbelievable things. We were not at full alert, and they will attack us on December 7th, early morning of Sunday morning, with a fleet of 6 aircraft carriers, 25 submarines, and nearly 36 additional support ships. So let's stop here for just a second and take a look at this short little video of what it looked like, because they're going to send 3 waves at us at a time. So let's stop here and look at this. Okay, now we're back. And you see that these 3 flights that the Japanese will send at us will just cause havoc. We're completely caught napping. In the attack, it's going to kill 2,400 Americans, most of them servicemen, because it's done mostly in the harbor. It's not done in Honolulu and killing Americans. It's done in a military operation. It's going to destroy 5 battleships completely. It's going to put 3 more out of commission. It's going to sink or seriously damage at least 11 other warships, 2 aircraft carriers, and over 180 aircraft are going to be destroyed on the ground. A horrific, decisive victory without question. One that the Americans today, you guys, have heard about. And, that's amazing that high school kids, juniors in high school, will have heard about this before. It's that big of a deal. Something that happened 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, is still impactful that you've heard about it. But I also want to point out he killed 2,400 Americans. I think if you were to ask the average American how many people died, they would say a much higher number. In the World Trade Centers, we lost 4,000 American lives, and a great many of those were women and children. I mean, they were all civilians, but we remember December 7th as a time in our country where we became sucker punched, and America rose to the occasion. Let me back up. They awoken to the occasion. In fact, Yamamoto was famously quoted as saying after the attack, and a complete success, he said he had gone to the University of Chicago, and he had said, "I fear that we have awoken a sleeping giant." And Mr. Yamamoto was right. The American spirit, the American economy, and the American will came out in full force. So how does the war look like? The war is going to start on December 8th. excuse me, December 8th of 1941. It's going to take us a little bit to get ramped up, to get ourselves moving. But once we do, we're going to engage in a bunch of naval battles. The first 6 to 8 months, we're really fighting it out, and we're really going up against the Japanese, and they're pushing us back, especially the first 3 months. They push us out of the Solomon Islands. They push us out of the Philippines, and they are beating up on us. And remember, the mentality of America was we had done the Japanese agreement in the turn of the century where we had really disgraced the Japanese people. We did not find them to be tough and honorable. We saw them more as weak. And America's getting beat up real bad early in the war by a group that we had berated and belittled. But as I mentioned earlier, we had broken the code, the Japanese code, so we knew what they were doing. So we will send out a group of transmissions that we knew the Japanese had broken our code, and we had suckered them into a small little group of islands called Midway in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where they are going to send a fleet of ships, and we're going to kind of turn around and return the favor that they did to us in Pearl Harbor. We're going to kind of sucker punch them by allowing them to think one thing when the exact opposite was really true. We sent out a bunch of bogus messages. We made it sound like our Navy, and especially our aircraft carriers, were not even close. We only had 2 of them, when in fact we had 4 of them, and we caught them napping, and we're going to have a decisive victory. Now, why Midway is so important is from the Battle of Midway on, and we're going to win that in June of 42. We will control the ocean. We'll control the Pacific. From August of 1942 to August, or from August of 42 to February of 1943, we push the Japanese back out of Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands. And it is gruesome, hand-to-hand fighting, combat, where the Japanese are amazing fighters. They are of tenacity, and oftentimes you can't take them prisoner. You had to kill them. And it was a gruesome place for us. A jungle. It wasn't open land. It was an area where you had to go into and fight because of the inability for us to distinguish where the Japanese were at. They had underground tunnels. They had fortified positions because they had been there for quite a while, and we were going to have to root them out. By 1944 and 1945, we had won major battles in the islands of Leyte, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. And these are all 3 just gruesome places. And Hacksaw Ridge was a movie done on that one, on Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. John Wayne was Iwo Jima, Okinawa was Hacksaw Ridge. If you want to see 2 examples of what the fighting was like, where we paid a heavy price to get this back. And our strategy in the Pacific was the Japanese had taken all these islands, all these small little islands, and we realized there's no use for us to take every single island. We control the seas. We can isolate and cut off the Japanese. So unless the island had a strategic purpose, a deep harbor, it was long enough to have a runway on it, it had something of value to us, we just isolated it and quarantined it. And we made the Japanese stand there by themselves. They couldn't get out and fight us. So we didn't waste all of our people on every single island. We had what was called island hopping. So be sure you remember that term, island hopping, where we would pick certain key strategic islands on our march to Japan. So we're going to work across, we're going to go west, and we're going to come up through the, oh, geez, I don't want to go back there. I want to go back. Sorry, guys. Getting a little crazy there. We're going to work our way back west and over to Japan and work our way up north and do this island hopping back through the Solomon Islands and through the Guadalcanal and the Philippines, couldn't think of that, the Philippines, and we're going to win that back. And eventually we're going to get close enough where we can start to bomb Japan. And let's stop there for right now, and let's take a look at one more video, and then we'll pick this up on Wednesday.